Well, it's funny because they keep operating on 95.
Just so you know, Todd, we're live.
No. Are you all set? Put you on the speaker. Yeah. It's well, question. I'm talking to Cameron. Okay, we can call. Sorry. All right.
Well, it's phenomenal.
You do the short stuff.
You know what I mean? Like, putting my back all together. Well, I stabbed a hole in the pen. Now I'm
Well, I think I have mine inside out.
tying it. It doesn't matter, they're not.
Well, and I think it's like just.
Scam.
You have to do that at work.
I have, yeah, I wear them at work, just to make people feel all more cozy inside. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, sometimes it is. How many people?
Yeah, we're gonna need the mic when we talk, will that pick it up?
It's picking everything up so far, but there is a lot of background noise, so you might want the mic. Just to.
My question is,
I
which one of
have.
you is talking? Can you be able to tell us about
Yes, this is connected.
Okay, so just let us know.
At first, when we first started, I had to have this and the face shield on for my iPhone. I cannot function. It is not too close, though.
I did a side swing.
I have Gunner's backpack, so I don't know what's in there. Oh, jeez.
When we go into it.
I don't know. They all have pharmaceutical names on them.
You know, I still trust him, because he's with the doctors. I still have to look at those guys. Because I think they're working in 6 grand for his teeth. What's
Hello, Steve.
Yeah. order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance with the flag at the back of the room. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to start with introductions of board members, and we would start, we'll start with Barbara.
And Jared's recording this for a live stream in case you didn't know that, so if when you speak, and I know some of you are staying masked while you're at your table, just speak very loud and clear so that that can be picked up, please.
Barbara Nickerson, Kingfield.
Cindy Dixon, Avon.
Nicole Norton, Phillip.
Serena Howard, Strong.
Jessica Kane, Phillips.
Julie Talmadge, Kingfield.
Kim Jordan, Kingfield.
Lois Barker, Strong. Jesse Stinchfield, Strong.
Paul Gardner, Avon.
Lynette Abbott, Phillips.
Jennifer Searles, Phillips.
Steve Hagstrom, Strong.
Kim Robinson, Kingfield.
Great, thank you. And next we'll do introductions for the administrative staff. Start with
Go
Joe.
ahead, Joe.
Okay, Johanna Prince, Principal, Kingfield Elementary School. Marie Olson, Special Director.
Lynn?
Lynn Carey, Business Manager.
John LaHaye, Maintenance and Transportation.
Todd Sanders, Superintendent. And we have Brendan Wiggins is out manning the door. And Jeff Pillsbury is in the overflow room, should it be needed.
And then we have
Jared Young, Technology Director.
Thank you. I'd like to get a motion to add 2 public comments to this agenda. One that would be placed before the discussion and one that would be placed after the discussion. And then I'd also like to add the swearing in of the new board member from Phillips.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Great. Did you?
I didn't see what the public comments were.
She's adding them.
We're just adding them to the agenda so that the public can speak
Oh.
prior to the discussion and then after the discussion. Great, thank you. Then, I just want to point out for the public comment, we greatly appreciate everybody being here. There's just a few rules to go with it, I'm sure you all know. But we would like you to, when you have a comment, that you stand up, state your name, where you are from, and what you state your questions. And if we just are trying to avoid a lot of repetitious questions, so if somebody has already asked the same questions, if you want to just add to it, then that's fine. Or you could just state that you support what so-and-so said, and this is why. We're just trying to save a little bit of time because we have a long discussion, obviously, ahead of us tonight. We just ask for your patience as we all travel through these uncharted waters. For the first time, we have a lot of discussion on the table tonight. At the end of the discussion, we'll have another comment if you guys would like to stay, and you can, make some more comments to that. And I would ask that you try to keep your comments to within a couple of minutes. And I think that's about it. Did I forget anything, Julie? Okay. Then I think before we open the floor up for public comment, we'll do the swearing in of the new board member. I'll come to you.
Give me 6.
Raise your hand.
I, Jennifer Searles,
I, Jennifer Searles,
do swear that I will faithfully discharge
I
I swear I will faithfully discharge
to the best of my
to the
abilities
best of my abilities
the duties incumbent to me as a school director
the duties incumbent to me as a school director
of school administrative number 58,
and school administrative number 58,
according to the Constitution
according to the Constitution
and laws of the state of Maine.
and the laws of the state of Maine.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Then we will open the floor up for public comment. Anybody? Want to save it for the end? Thank you.
My name is Erin Demshar, and I live in Carabassa Valley. Have two 8-year-old third graders attending KES. Also the new math teacher here, but have previously worked here in special ed prior to this, and worked at CBA for the past 2 years as a math teacher there. I was not able to be involved in the planning for this, but have read through the plans thoroughly. And I was just hoping that there might be somebody from the planning committee who could speak to the effect of considerations that might be made for teachers who are teaching live, online, or however, but also have school-age children that need to be logged in and taught at the same time, especially if we end up going back to red mode at some point. But I just would like to hear anybody's input or perspective on that, as well as I noticed that school drop-off for the kids is listed at 7:45 a.m. And so as a parent who would be trying to drop their kids off to help with transportation, whether or not that's being considered as teachers who also might need to be on time or at their building for kids to arrive to their classes on time.
Thank you, Erin.
I'm going to do a lot of talking tonight. Does anybody that's on those committees want to speak before I do to any of this? No? The drop-off question I'll go to first. That is obviously a supervision issue because we can't have students gathering in central locations in large numbers, so they have to get off buses and go directly to their homerooms or first period class, whatever the situation may be in the school. And we have to have people there to supervise them. So that's, we can't have kids arrive in between before the contractual time. I think your question was if you're an employee of the district and you're dropping a child off, then you can't be there at 7:45. That might be a consideration. And, you know, we're going to have to work together and step to the plate and try to help one another out. It's easy for me to say that now.
Right.
Until we hit the road running with some of these scenarios, you know, there's going to be things, I think it was Joe or someone in our admin team yesterday said, every time we come up with one answer, it generates 2 more questions. But certainly we'll work with parents around the child care issue. The first part of your question, can you repeat it?
Teachers with school-age children, they have to teach.
Oh, as part, I'm not sure which one of the plans you saw. We met, was it just yesterday? These days run together. We met all day yesterday to address the remote learning component of any of our plans, or especially the plan when there are students, when we're teaching in person. And we did tweak that a little bit. We updated it on the website last night, so I'm not sure if you have the updated one, but we're looking at a remote, a teacher designated specifically for remote learning, and it could be across various grade levels. So that's, as far as in class, it would be the teacher doing the remote and the in-class instruction, or at least that's part of our proposal right now. Does that answer you?
I think that my question or concern was, will there potentially be some flexibility where if I'm the classroom teacher and I'm at home and I am to log in and teach my live sessions, but yet my kids are at home also and need to be logging in at particular times. Like, is there a sense of flexibility there at all as far as me taking attendance for my high school kids, but as well as my children who are in programs that need to also?
I mean, again, I think those are unique. Every case, I think we're going to have to do on a case-by-case scenario. At this point, even with our remote learning, we have staff in the building 5 days a week.
Thank you, Erin.
I think all parents are facing
Oh, yes.
challenges too. It's not just teachers who are going to face those kinds of challenges, you know, for how they are doing their own work or however. I think everybody's in that same boat. You know, yeah. I understand your question, I just,
We're all in it together.
yeah.
Okay?
Hi, I'm Julie Swain from Kingfield. Sorry, I forget to take this off. To expand on Aaron's question, has there ever been any consideration for teachers, if it's code red or any remote learning, for teachers to be in their classroom so there's no distractions while they're addressing the class? So they could enter on their own, be isolated in their room, and have good Wi-Fi
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, that would certainly be something we would allow. I mean, we tried to keep our buildings open during last spring, so that staff could come in for that very reason if they needed to. So that's certainly, unless we're told by some power above that no one can enter into the facilities, as long as we're practicing social distancing and the masking and things like that, then I think that would be a great opportunity. We would want that to be afforded to our staff.
Christy Newman, Strong, and really just have one thing, and that is that I'm really, really hopeful that you'll make a decision tonight, whatever the decision is. I'm one of those people who's looking at the time and getting a little anxious, and I believe in having good discussion, but I'm hoping that it doesn't get moved from one meeting to the next meeting to the next meeting. It'd be awesome if a decision could be made tonight, and that's really all I can say.
That is our goal.
We didn't script that, but I'm gonna piggyback on exactly what you just said. That was one of the things I was gonna encourage the board to do. I tried to be as transparent with the information as I could and get it out to you as soon as possible. They're pretty lengthy documents. I'm hoping that everyone has had a chance to read them over and will present questions to me. For this presentation, I've tried to highlight some of the hot topics or the key points of each one of those. I'm hoping we don't have to go through, but if we need to, we will. I was talking to Kim earlier about that. But I'm hoping that and they will put out public too as well, so that the public will be able to see them and review them in case they had any questions or concerns. I know a lot of our neighboring districts have gone into a meeting intending to make a decision, and that has happened, things have been tabled. And I'm hoping that because we were as transparent and providing stuff with you in as timely a manner as possible, that the board will feel comfortable making a decision this evening as well, because I'm glad we waited to this time, because we got to see a lot of things on play, and we got to learn from others' mistakes, but it is a tough decision. People are passionate about it. People have strong opinions about it. We tried to weigh all those things in our decision, and we tried to address every one of those and come up with what we thought were the best options for the safety and education of our students and staff. So I'm hoping that I agree with what Christy said. I'm hoping we can make a decision this evening, because this is just step one. There is much more work that has to be done once we get the direction that we're going.
More public comment?
Lights are really okay.
Would anybody like lights?
Are we all right? Well,
Huh? It is a little dark, I agree.
now, Scott, you know where the light switches are? You might know. Oh, you're going to point them? Thank you, Scott.
We got it.
Okay?
Thank you. All right. Next we have under general information, elementary and secondary education act application update.
Okay, well, if you look at the chart behind me, these are just some informational pieces that I thought the board should hear tonight. The ESEA is the federal grants that we get every year. Our application was submitted and approved, so we have been guaranteed these monies that I'm showing in front of you through our four title lines that we get money from. So that's just an informational piece for the board. The PPE, we got a call from the National Guard today. The DOE portion of PPE, those are the personal protection equipment, is scheduled to be delivered Tuesday. So Scott, you're all set with that. Scott's been kind of our point person with the DOE as far as the PPEs go. He and I, as soon as the opportunity came for us to go on, the state didn't tell us, they told us that you could not exceed this amount. So we obviously went in and took right up to whatever the amount was we said that we couldn't exceed, but the problem we ran into was we'd go in there and things that we needed to order were either not available or they would suddenly disappear from the ordering page. Scott, where do we stand as far as the PPE order stuff? Did we get most of it in?
There are no gowns, no extra large gloves, no mask straps, and the N95 masks they took completely right off the web.
Okay. So what we did get to order would be cloth masks, the disposable masks. I'm just going from memory here. But the items that we did get to order, we will be receiving on Tuesday. Considering that, when this whole process began, I also reached out to a private provider of PPEs. I've been in communication with them. I just got the price quote from them, and they're indicating they can get everything that we needed, which is some of the stuff that the state obviously has not been able to get. And they should have it in a 2 or 3 week turnaround. So I'd like to place the order for that. There's a little hold up on that. I'm going to ask the board a question about that in just a minute. But the price quote for all the PPE stuff that we need is $45,000. So just for informational purposes right now. So we will be ordering those things that apparently we can't get through the state right now, in hopes that the private provider will be able to do them for us. At this point, they're indicating to me that they will. So, the CARES Act, we submitted our CARES Act. That was the initial act that came out for COVID relief stuff. We were allotted $183,254.85. We submitted our application. There was one correction that needed to be made. We submitted it on July 9th. The feedback came July 13th. However, their system did not send out the email notification that it was supposed to send out. So neither Lynn or I were aware that we needed to make a little tweak to our application. But rather than going to make that tweak, since then there's another relief act that's come out, the CRF fund. That one, as you can see behind me, is considerably more money. For us, that's $531,805.36. The difference between the two is the CARES Act will run the entire school year. The CRF we have to spend by December 30th. And in a district such as ours, where we work hard with the money that we have, to tell us we have to spend $500,000, we're going to do it. But to tell us that we have to do it, you can imagine the challenges that presents to us. It's just a little different position that we're in. So it's in some ways it's a good thing the application was kicked back and we didn't get that notification, because now what we're going to do is we're going to remove things from the CARES Act that we can purchase before December 30th. When we talk about things like staffing, additional nurse hours, additional custodial hours, things of that nature, we want that to extend for the entire school year. Now I know December 30th is kind of the magic targeted deadline of some of this stuff, but realistically, it's probably, in all reality, it's probably going to extend beyond that. So when we get these positions in place, we don't want to lose them in December if we still need them. So we're going to shift monies back and forth. So those CARE Acts, we're still in the process of doing that. I'm hoping to get them. My goal is to get them submitted today, but we still got some things we're adding to them. So hopefully I'll get those submitted tomorrow. As part of this process, Lynn has had to create a bunch of different lines, budget lines. Am I saying it right? So it's hours and hours of work to create those lines. Once those lines are created, we can go ahead and start ordering things. The issue is we have to pay for stuff up front, and then we get reimbursed after we submit to the grants. Some of these things we need to order sooner rather than later. The problem is when we submit the grants, we don't know what the turnaround time is. And Lynn, being very cautious, as she should be, is reluctant to process any purchases until we have guarantee that that money is going to come to us. Now, I think it's Lorraine that said it at our meetings that we've never known monies of this nature once we complete the application not to come through. But we're talking, if you total those monies up, we're talking almost 10% of our entire school district budget. That's a lot of money. So if for some reason we were to order these things, pay for them in advance, and something happened with the monies, that's a debt we really can't pay. So Lynn and I would ask the board's preference on us starting to order some of the things once those lines are set up, which will probably be either tomorrow or Monday. is the board comfortable with us beginning to order some things in anticipation of those monies coming to us? Or does the board want us to wait, realizing that the longer we wait, like the
The less
the
that's going to
PPEs,
be
for example,
available to
more
you.
schools are gonna say, hey, we're not getting everything we need. They're gonna start reaching out to other providers as well. We run the risk of either not having or receiving things much later than we need them.
I totally respect what you're saying, Len. I've been put in that position ourselves, just being in the retail industry. I just don't, I think what Lorene's saying is that you've never run into it before, that where they didn't come through.
I've been working grants for 18 years, between here and Chicago, and I've never seen, if they say they're going to reimburse us, they reimburse us.
Right,
If they
right.
didn't, the whole state would be
Right.
in trouble. You know, I'm not saying how to vote, but if we don't order some of this stuff, we won't be ready for school to start.
Yeah.
We won't be able to start seeing out some of it. But I don't know. But I've never had one thing giving me my amount, so this is a final amount. I've never seen that change.
Cindy's got a hand. Oh, I'm sorry, Cindy.
I'd like to make a motion that we give permission for ordering to start taking place immediately. I think we need the items. And as long as there's confidence that the appropriate things that are being ordered are in fact reimbursable, then I'd like to see you start ordering.
Is this the 45,000 in PPE you're talking about, or is this above and
Now, there's additional things in there. What I would do is I would go through, and Lynn and I would prioritize in consultation with obviously the administrators, but we wouldn't go order the entire $700,000 worth of stuff, Monday. We would just look at the stuff as timeliness of what we need, when we need it, and we would strategically order the essential stuff to begin with. And then hopefully we'll get, the turnaround time on the CARES Act was originally 3 days, I think. So I'm hoping if everything gets in tomorrow, we'll hear back by the middle of next week. So then we would have the guarantee, and then it wouldn't be such a big concern.
So as a practical addition to the motion, could we have the vote on this after we discuss and perhaps decide what we're doing? Like we haven't even discussed what we're doing, what we want to do, what it entails. I mean, if we were to decide that we were going to stay red, all of that is not necessarily a necessity. Am I right?
Could we table the motion until we have board action down in 4? Could we just table it until 4 when we have board action?
Yep.
Was a motion of a second?
It was seconded by Sabrina.
She have to rescind the motion?
So now there's a motion to table it, if somebody has to second that and vote on it, I think.
Are you okay?
I'll second.
Julie's motion to put it into 4. But does Sabrina need to rescind her motion?
We could, or we could just vote to table.
No, I don't need to rescind.
Just vote on it.
All those in favor
Tabling.
to tabling it into 4?
Yep.
It's just a cart and horse thing.
Can I ask a question? The CRF grant, what is that, what's allowable in that spend?
Then you created all those lines today. What are some of the, you read it, banged up a bunch of them today. You want
Both grants cover items that are not already listed and planned for in your regular budget. So it's anything above and beyond. It could mean purchasing modular classrooms, it could mean purchasing storage units, additional buses or vans. It could mean extra manpower, so for instance, paying stipend positions or paying overtime for above and beyond work for extra cleaning or maintenance having to do with COVID-related items. It can mean extra technology that you weren't planning on, online subscriptions, things of that nature. Anything that is justifiably COVID-related that is not in your budget.
So nurses for elementary school?
Extra hours for nurses, so our nurses worked at the elementary level 2 days a week, so it could mean paying extra hours to have, right.
Thank you.
We're doing what Lynn was saying, it's the whole, we can supplement, but we can't supplant. So we can't use that money to take things out of our local budget. We can add to them, but we can't replace them. Moving on. Okay, so these are the 3 items that we really need to discuss today. And there wasn't an update to your agenda. So the first item, the school calendar modification, is an update, which you'll see on your updated agenda. The health and safety expectations, which is an 18-page document, and the academic models, the red, yellow, and green that everybody's familiar with. Before we go on any further, there are a lot of people and a lot of different organizations that I've worked with directly, that I've begged, borrowed, and stolen from to create and shared with the administrative team, and we've just molded those into what we think best fits SAD 58. But I do want to make sure that they get the credit they deserve, so that's why I've included them here in our list. School calendar modification. What I would be asking the board today, because you approve our school calendar, any change that need to be made to it, the board needs to approve and vote on. I am requesting that we push the start of the student school day back to the 8th of September. That will be the Tuesday after the holiday weekend. What that would allow us to do is create 5 workshop days for a variety. I've listed there some of the things that could occur during those days, but it just gives our staff time to get into the buildings and make all the changes that we have to make to adhere to the expectations, the guidelines that we have, primarily from the Maine Department of Education and the Maine Department of Center for Disease Control. Those are the guidelines. It will give us a chance to distribute the PPEs. You can imagine how many thousands of items we're talking. We're trying to purchase 5 cloth masks for every student, staff member in the district. So you can figure that's about 800 people, so that times 5. So there's a lot of stuff that has to be distributed out. We do need professional development for our staff. They're going to need time to learn either new technology devices, software that we're purchasing to help us not only in the classroom setting, but help us if we decide, or if we're told we have to go remotely. Positive behaviors intervention supports, PBIS, was a goal of the district this year. It'll give us an opportunity to work on that. Trauma-informed practices. This has been a traumatic experience. Some of our kids experience trauma in a, quote, normal situation. This has, in some cases, made that much more significant. Schedules are going to have to be revised. No matter what plan we come up with to accommodate class sizes, schedules are going to need to be altered in some capacity. Food service preparation. We may have to add additional lunch periods so that we can feed all our students. If students are participating remotely, we have to provide them the opportunity to pick up food, similar to what we've been doing all summer. So that is something that we'll have to build time for. And then obviously a remote learning curriculum for those students who either can't participate with us or whose families have opted to have them participate remotely based on concerns around what we're experiencing. My proposal would be that we move 3 workshop days from our existing calendar to the start of the school year. The dates that are already workshop days would then become student seat days. So we would just go to school on those days. The 3 workshop days would be October 12th, March 18th, and June 11th. March 18th was set pretty much in stone because all the WMEC schools go to a rendezvous, the teachers and ed techs go to a rendezvous, professional development. That rendezvous has been canceled this year. So that will not be occurring, so that is kind of a void there right now in our schedule or in our calendar to begin with. And these changes remain within our contractual agreements. Some districts are adding additional workshop days which go beyond what the contractual number that staff have to participate in. That leads to some other issues. This would stay within our contractual obligations. And if there's a calendar in your packet, I can have a link if somebody needs a calendar presented.
You said March 18th, March 19th?
I'm sorry.
That one's scheduled Friday, March 9th.
If I have it wrong, it's March 19th, then yeah, whatever that.
Sorry, October 9th. Was October? Was the 12th? Right.
Was I looking at the wrong calendar? when I
Yeah.
did that? Oh, okay. Disregard all those dates. We're going to take 3 days and move them to the front of the screen. I must have been looking at last year's calendar.
And the other one, there was October, March, and
June, that would be the last day. Whatever that is, and that could change based on.
What about November 4th? November 25th, right before Thanksgiving.
What about that one? That was not one of the ones we were going to leave.
Going to remain that
That would
as a
remain that
workshop.
one as a workshop.
I'd make a motion to push the school day back until September 8th and rearrange the workshops at the other.
To the appropriate dates.
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
what did she move, what did you?
To make the adjustments to the calendar.
All those in favor? Thank you.
Moving on. Okay, the Maine Department of Education has a framework for returning to classroom instruction, and there are 6 requirements that we have to adhere to for safely opening our schools. These are the 6 requirements. There's a link there that will take you to the DOE framework. I shared that, and the documents that we've posted, I should say the documents have been posted on the website, so anybody that wants to go to these various sites can go and link to them. But these are the 6 key bullet points that we have to adhere to. Some people say, well, why, if they're just recommendations, why do you have to adhere to them? We would run the risk of losing our state subsidies and federal subsidies if we do not adhere to these guidelines. And as you saw from one of my previous slides, we received quite a bit of money. That doesn't even share the state subsidy. So those are just federal grants. So it's pretty imperative that we adhere to the guidelines as they have been presented to us.
The first one is pretty, how are we gonna know that that's, you know,
Yep.
you're talking about adhering to it
Yep.
and not getting,
We have faith in our staff and our families that they're.
the first link in that chain is
Yeah, I know.
suspect.
Yeah. I think if you go through any of these, you could point at them and say that's questionable. I mean, there's no magic answer that would address all of these. Going on. So what I tried to do, as I said, the health and safety expectations is a 19-page document with a lot of repetition. So what I tried to do, the board has had it since last week, so as I said, I'm hoping if there are questions about it, that you'll just direct us after I go through the bulleted highlights. Then we can address any specific questions that board members may have. But these are, and here you go, there's your first one right on the top of the list. These are the health and safety expectations that we propose. So the first is the self-checks. Okay, and there was discussion initially about would you screen students before they get on buses or before they enter buildings. Well, screening them before they enter the building, if you allow them on your transportation, kind of defeats the purpose. And the screening on the prior to entering or boarding the buses is just a logistical nightmare as far as the time it would take and the impact that it would have on the delivery of students. So the self-checks, this is the model that every district that I'm aware of is going with. I'm sure there are some out there that are doing it differently. The face coverings, a lot of you are wearing them today. If this plan was to go into place, it would be a requirement throughout the buildings. Tonight we were trying to practice social distancing. People were wearing the face masks. I had an administrator asking people to please do that as they came into the building. If this board was to approve our health and safety expectations, that would be an expectation of students and staff while they are in our buildings. Classrooms, transitioning hallways, things of that nature. Obviously, those of you who are wearing now, and maybe it's new to you, it's not always the most pleasant of experiences. So we will have to build mask breaks into our schedules. And right now, the guidance is that those occur outside whenever possible. We are entertaining the idea of outside classrooms, doing instruction outside, maintaining that social distancing so it can be done without masks. But at this time, that would be the expectation should the board approve this. PPE, we will be providing them. Parents, guardians, staff can provide their own PPE stuff as long as they adhere to the expectations of the CDC. I mentioned the frequent face breaks. Hygiene and infection control measures. There will be actual training on how to properly wash hands. And we'll have sanitation stations throughout the buildings. One thing I didn't put on here is we'll have touchless bottled water filling stations we're purchasing through our schools so that people won't have to push the buttons at the water fountains and use the universal water fountains. I think, Scott, you're going to shut off actually the water fountain, the bubbler part, right?
Here, we're gonna replace them with water fill,
Okay.
shut off the bottom part. And the other ones that I'm trying to get, do not even have an option of getting water out of it into the wall.
So we would ask students to bring, and staff to bring their own water at the start of the day, and then they could replenish that throughout the day. We do have to have a special medical room. This opens up some questions as well around that whole, if we have a student who has a symptom, but we do have to have an identified medical room for COVID-related symptoms specifically. A student can't be sent to the nurse's office where we have a student who has skunned their knee on the playground or something, and that's why they're in the nurse's office, and then you put someone in the same space that's demonstrating these symptoms. So you have to have a special identified space for COVID related symptoms, and then obviously if you had someone in there, that would have to be thoroughly cleaned once they have left. Nurses and any staff who may have to work closely with students, there are additional PPEs that they have to wear, including goggles, gowns, gloves, things of that nature, just because they have to come in within a distance of students that we're being advised staff should not. 6 feet is the adult from students guideline. There are staff that have to work closely with students based on students' individual needs. So there may be staff that have to do that. There certainly will be nurses that have to do that, so that they will be required to wear additional PPE. Our existing ventilation systems Scott's been going around looking at those and trying to tweak those, and some of the things he's found has been interesting, to say the least. When possible, those systems are being fixed internally and upgraded so that they function as they can. Some, it's just not an option, so we'll be looking at portable type. This would go under the COVID purchase stuff that someone asked about, ventilation units. In some cases, it's a matter of cracking a window, having a fan blowing air out of the room. A concern, I guess, of this is it kind of goes against it goes against our whole building safety and security thing, where we're trying to keep our buildings tight and secure, and you have to have windows or doors open to circulate the air, but it's one of those, catch-22s. Increased cleaning and disinfecting of our facilities and transportation vehicles. Scott has given me additional hours that we can bring additional staff on, should we be able to find them, so that they could provide some additional cleaning support and services. We're talking about altering our evening custodial schedule so that they arrive earlier in the day, so that there can be cleaning going on perhaps while students are still there, or certainly at the immediate end of the day, which means they won't be in the buildings to the evening hours as late as they have been. But the importance is getting those buildings cleaned as quickly as we can. And then the social distancing. Right now, the guideline is students can sit 3 feet apart with masks, and that's the guideline we're using for classrooms. It's the guidelines we're using for our transportation. So 3 feet is the magic number, if you will, for students. For staff, it's 6 feet from other adults and 6 feet from students.
So Todd?
Yeah.
PPE.
Yep.
And we're providing to students and staff.
Yep.
Great with that. Staff, I'm quite sure you'll all know where yours is all the time. Students.
Yep.
They cannot get on the bus without.
Nope. We will have, we're buying, I don't know how many thousands of disposable. The cloth ones are reusable. Our expectation, we'll give them 5, 1 for each day of the week, and actually it's an extra one based on one of our proposals for scheduling. And the hope is they wear 1 each day, and then on the weekend they just throw them in the washing machine and clean them. Kids sometimes forget things. So the buses will have disposable masks on them that they could wear for the day and then discard after the day's use.
And is that an endless thing, or is there could they forget every day?
They could. You know, this is going to have to be a teaching moment too for many students, especially some of our young, because they just won't understand why they're being asked. And there will be some kids who make choices with a mask that they're not trying to be disruptive, they're not trying to be, you know, naughty little children. They just don't know. So there is going to be some teaching that has to go along. That being said, there's also the safety factor. So it's kind of a fine line we walk with teaching and making adjustments. We can make adjustments. There are, you know, face shields are an option in certain situations. The PPEs that we purchased, I am purchasing enough face shields for all staff and students in the district. Should there be a need, or should things get loosened up down the road a little bit and masks, you know, they say now shields are good enough. We just don't know. But it will be, again, it's one of those, we answer one question and two more pop up.
Right.
Thank you. Jess?
So my question is, who makes the call that the child needs to be sent to the COVID room? And what symptoms are going to be classified as a potential COVID?
It's in the packet, the symptoms, there's a symptoms checklist.
Okay,
I just looked through it.
I didn't see it.
There's a link at the very end.
Does that
A
mean
link?
an automatic quarantine? Does that mean?
Well, when you received it electronically last week,
But I didn't notice, does that mean okay, we all get fevers, we all get sick, we
Oh,
all
yeah.
get colds.
yeah.
So if they're exhibiting signs of COVID, does that mean an automatic quarantine? They have to get tested before they can come back to school?
They have to go to a primary care physician.
Even if they have,
The PCP will then determine if additional testing is warranted. And Dr. Dave Dixon is here. I'm not going to put you on the spot, Dr. Dave, but I am. But Dr. Dave met with the nurses and myself. We met. I should have said how these things were developed for this one that we're talking about now. I created a document based on a lot of other stuff that I was pulling in, and then it went to a stakeholders group. It went to the administrators. Then it went to a stakeholders group, and then it went to nurses, and Dr. Dixon was with us. They were the final check of approval, I guess, if you will. So if you want to speak to what may happen once we feel students demonstrated symptoms, what it may look like in the medical realm, I would welcome you to do that.
But can I introduce you first, Dr. Dixon, just because I'm sure there's several people in here that don't know who you are. This is Dr. David Dixon, and he has been MSAD 58's doctor for plenty of years, a lot of years. And I just wanted to...
I think you asked me a question, but I have to tell you that I lost my left ear piece, and this afternoon my right one I lost that in Jackman.
Oh.
It's like Vegas. I think if you lose something in Vegas, you don't talk about it, it stays there. You lose something in Jackman, it stays there. My left ear just kind of failed me today, so yell at me.
What was it? So my question was, when we feel a student has demonstrated, or by our checklist, they demonstrated COVID-related symptoms, and we send them to the school nurse thinks that's legit, we send them home. Then we recommend that the primary care physician will, then what happens once it's recommended to the primary care physician?
What happens then?
Yeah.
To get them back in?
Yeah.
That comes later in
And it's in that document, but, I mean, the primary care physician then determines if a test is necessary or not, right, based on the symptoms?
Yeah, testing is really tough to get right now. In truth, basically, the testing ought to be done every other week. If we had all the tests we could do, that would be the best way to deal with it, and probably be and keep kids out of school and keep kids from infecting each other and so forth and so on. Unfortunately, the tests that we now are using are actually 30 to 40, about 30% false negatives. So that means one test doesn't count. You got to have two that are negative, and you got to do them within 24 hours, because if you don't, then you risk a chance of having having another exposure, and off you go. So my assumption is that the medical community as a whole will understand that. They should already, because they have been dealing with that. In practices, I think all of the community health practices and and certainly all the practices in Farmington, have been working with this for the last, 4 or 5 months. So that probably doesn't answer anybody's question. Probably just raises more.
It's all, yeah.
But it's actually the way things are going to be for a while. It's just that I think this is that, you haven't gone through this whole thing yet, but it seems to me that what this does is it allows us to continue to do what we've already been doing, and that is finding out what's happening and keeping abreast of what's going on and allowing us to change and move with what seems to be happening. Nobody knows what's happening. The one thing I can say is that we're in the best place in the country. Well, we're not quite the best place in the country, but nearly the best place in the country in terms of whether we're going to get hit by a significant problem. We actually are Vermont stands above us with something like 0.2% infection rate. We now stand, I think it was 0.5 today, and New Hampshire is up around 0.75, 0.8, something like that. But they got Massachusetts hanging off their butt, so that gives them a problem. So if we play this right and stay ahead of it and think about it, we have a best chance of being able to take care of our kids and the rest of the population, in terms of figuring out how to keep it from really being a huge challenge. But it's going to be a big challenge anyhow.
Thank you, sir.
You need to yell at me if you want me to.
We'll get your attention.
Thank you, sir.
I know in the retail world, if an employee comes down with the symptoms, then obviously they can't return to work, but they just they go see their family doctor, and the doctor makes a decision whether they could come back to work or not.
You have a 72-hour. If you have fever, chills, whatever, 72 hours, once you are symptom-free for 72 hours, you can return. I don't have a problem keeping my kid home when she has the sniffles, but my kid went to daycare this entire time, and it was fine when it was just her and her sister there. But last week we added in some others, and as you know with kids, they just seem to be, when they're not used to each other, they seem to come down with sniffles. And then my kid had the sniffles for the weekend. But she was fine, but she just had the sniffles.
So, it's uncharted, and we just...
Yeah.
I have a legitimate concern about parents not having proper ways to test, like thermometers. I know for a fact mine broke right before this happened, and just to buy one that I would normally spend $20 on, they were like $80. So I don't know that it's possible in the monies from the grant. I have no idea whether that's possible to do that, to send them to families, because that right there is the first step to make sure that all of us parents are doing that, because otherwise you're not really going to have the kids going into the clinic with fevers if we're all kind of doing it every morning, if we're all being diligent in doing that. But if a lot of parents don't have, a way to do that, because I don't really think that's the way that we can be doing it.
Short of, and this is how this process works. Someone comes up with a question like that, we try to brainstorm, and I'm shooting from the hip right now, but I mean, in a situation such as that, parents certainly could reach out to the school, the nurse. We're hoping to have nurses at the school every day of the week. Could say, my child, I'm concerned, but I don't have the proper measure of testing. And they could bring their child, and perhaps at the site, before the student's allowed to get into the building, the nurse could administer. We are purchasing the scanners.
I anticipate that first step right there, like we said earlier, just to reiterate, that might be.
Yeah.
I'd like to say something. The symptoms change all the time for kids. Taste, they can have, it can be positive because of that. I had a 10-year-old niece that had that. She didn't have the taste, and she didn't have the fever or anything, but she wasn't feeling well, didn't have the taste, and got tested, and she had the virus and came back positive. So I hadn't heard of that before.
That's on, that checklist, if you look at that checklist, it's pretty comprehensive, and I think any one of us look at it at one point, we can probably say, oh, I've had this, because it's just such a wide range of stuff that's on that list.
So,
Continue. The gatherings, obviously, in one, which were, whoops,
Barbara?
sorry.
I really think that you put a lot of thought into this. And I think Kim's headed down a good path with concerns about the self-check. Would there be, and I'm a problem solver, so I'm thinking, is it that the bus drivers are fully engaged in their job and can't take on that duty? And if so, would volunteers be able to be?
Every volunteer you put on a bus is one less student you can put on a bus. So you're decreasing the number of students we can transport. Scott, I'm going to look at you, you're over her shoulder as far as the bus driver's responsibility of needing to stop the bus and administer a check, and then if it's at a bus stop and a student doesn't pass and there's no parent there.
That is exactly right. I mean, we have actually discussed this. Bus drivers doing a very safety-sensitive function. You're stopped at a stop. You're not only looking at the child to make sure they're getting on the bus safely, you have to scan every mirror constantly. The cars that are going by you or coming this way. I really don't think it's in the best interest of a bus driver to take their eyes off of everything else they're supposed to do to take a temperature.
And there's going to be so many children being transported by parents and or walking that you can't, that would only be a drop in the bucket for the tests anyway, so.
There does have to be some accountability. We have to have faith that people are going to do what's in the best interest of the masses.
I work in healthcare, and we're required to self-check or self-monitor twice a day. And we don't document it anywhere, it's just, that's an expectation. So it's the same thing in this instance. And I don't know if there's some HIPAA thing around why, you can't mandate that they write the temperature and report it, but.
We've been told not to do that.
Yeah, so I think it's just the same instance. The same instance.
Moving on. So the gatherings, that is still in place, the 50 inside, which is why we, as you came through, you probably saw we had the gym set up in the event that we had more than 50 people here tonight. 100 people, 100 individuals outside. Shared materials, obviously, we're discouraging the use of shared materials, and if materials do have to be shared, there are some manipulatives that have to be shared. Those need to be cleaned prior to, during the whole sharing process. Outdoor classrooms, I've mentioned that. Storage containers, we're looking at purchasing 6 40 by something containers. We're going to put one on each school location so that any materials that need to be moved out of classrooms to create additional space will be available to teachers and staff. We are going to have 2 additional, and Scott, I don't think I've talked to you since we discussed this, but we'll have 2 additional storage containers for overflow stuff or for district-wide stuff, which we will store across the street. The MTA storage might also be across the street because it's in such close proximity. It just makes it easier if it's on site because then Scott's crew can plow in front of it, so we'll have accessibility to it if we need to. We contract plowing services at our other schools, so we can't guarantee how the accessibility will be. But that's the plan right now with storage containers. Our facilities, it goes against everything I believe in, making schools as welcoming and as nurturing to our students and our families and our community as possible, but we are going to have to lock our schools down. We're going to have to make them essential business only. So when people come to our schools, contractors, for example, will have to come, we'll try to schedule them outside of school day hours. Parents, if they're coming, will have to call and let someone know they're coming. Our doors will be locked just to prevent outside individuals from coming into the buildings. If in the event that has to happen, all our expectations around PPEs will be extended to those individuals as well. Student and staff demonstrating the COVID-related symptoms must implement home isolation protocol. This gets back to what we've already been discussing. Any areas of a building individual with a confirmed case will have to be closed immediately, remain closed. Then we get into the whole notification of people who may have been in close proximity, may have been out to restaurants where they're asking for your name and contact information. We'll have to know where our students are and who they're interacting with in the event, hopefully it never happens, but if we get a confirmed case, then areas that that individual has been in will need to be closed down and thoroughly cleaned, and we'll need to, in the most careful way, and understanding the rights of the individual, we will have to make others individuals aware that they could have been in contact with someone who has tested positive. Face coverings obviously have to be removed during meals. You can't eat with a face covering. At that time, students will be 6 feet apart. This may occur, this would be the exception to the indoor mask all the time rule. If possible, we'll be eating outside. Meals will be prepared individually for students with individual utensils. That means no brownies can be sent in for the class on someone's birthday of that nature, because the sharing of food just can't happen. When possible, students will eat outside, but there are times, obviously, as we know, the weather changes, they will have to eat inside. Food, transportation, we've already talked about that, 3 feet spacing, which equals 1 student on a seat. You can put multiple students on a seat if they're from the same household. The problem is if you put 2 students on 1 seat, you start to infringe on that 3-foot spacing, so you may, in essence, defeat the purpose of having students from the same household. Is that true, Scott? 2 students on 1 seat might negate the other seat?
You can put 2 in 1 seat, the child across from it would have to sit right next to the window. So there's 26 seats on the bus. You can have 1 seat, there's 26. If you have families, you can go no more than 2 up to a seat in order to maintain the 3-foot distance. So the 26 is kind of like the minimum. You might get lucky to get 34.
And obviously, that is something we had to take into consideration when we drafted our educational plans that we'll talk about a little later. And I already mentioned that the schools will be locked until we have duty coverage, so when students get dropped off, things of that nature. And then in that pamphlet that I provided you, that 19-page document, I broke down every one of the criteria based on general, which applies to everybody. So there's items in there that no matter who you are, you have to adhere to. There are staff items, which apply primarily to staff members. There are items that pertain primarily to students, and there are items that pertain primarily to parents and guardians. I'll open up the document right now. If there are, just to share an example, Shelley's in there. Shelley. So this is the document that we're talking about that we put together. It is available on the website. It was just updated on the 11th. There was some tweaking. And as with any of these documents, I guess I should say, there may be need to update them as we go along, because the information we get just changes. So these are working documents that will need to be updated as we go along. This you've already, most of this stuff you've already seen, because I highlighted in the bullets. This is the first section is health and safety, and this is a large section because it's the big one. Here, as you can see, is the general, applies to everybody. I went through and I pulled most of the important bullets out of there. So I don't know, Kim, if you want me to go through this or how you want to proceed now. I can just show people if they haven't seen the document. So this is all general. This all applies to everybody. And then you'll see as we get further down, then there becomes some staff things. Some of this is even repetition. I think it's better to be said multiple times than not enough. And then you have students, and then you have parent guardians. The next spot is physical distancing and facilities. Again, the same 4 groups we talk about. I'll just go through what the key points are in here right now so you'll know. Technology, we talk about the tech department. They obviously have to handle devices, so they're handling materials that come to them from other individuals, so they have extra precautionary stuff they have to be aware of. Our special ed.
Is this available on the website for parents to go
It is.
on? So if anybody here doesn't have a copy of the health and safety expectations, you can go on the website, the district website. and print that.
Special education's another section. Playground section. Remote alternative instruction has its own section. Leaving or returning from school due to illness, kind of along the lines of what we've already been talking about, has a pretty lengthy section about how staff and students should deal with any symptoms or actual identified cases. It's a pretty comprehensive document.
Question?
Yeah.
So what's the plan for distribution? Is it going to each household?
I think that's whatever the board would like. I mean, we can certainly make whatever the board feels is best, we can make it happen. Right now, it is on social media. Did it go out on something? Look at it. One.
It is posted on the website and on a link on our Facebook page for people there.
Yeah. So right now it is, and we did send out a blast, but the blast only impacts obviously people who have students. So community members who may be interested may not know it's there, but it certainly we can make it as public as the board would like us to. We can buy additional supplies
Can
to.
we get some to town offices and
Sure.
put it, you know what I mean, so people could,
I can do similar to what I did with the budget newsletters, flyers. I can distribute them to local
instead of the
businesses. Yeah.
mailing would be
Yep.
pretty costly, I think, to send.
Our mailing would be very costly. Now, we can build it in. That is a COVID-19 related expense, so additional paper we have to purchase to print, postage, whatever, we certainly can do that under the COVID amount. We have put some money in there actually for that. I don't know if it would be an amount to cover the mailing of a 19-page document.
I don't think we need a mailing, I think just as long as
Yep.
each household that has a student or staff member
Yep.
receives notification that it's available and that the expectation is that they read it and follow it.
And the final, there's food service is in there, transportation is in there, adult education is in there, because they do use our facilities. This is the reference and materials links. So in there, we've got CDC guidelines for self-checking symptoms. There's a self-checking symptom checklist. There's a self-assessment questionnaire. There's a proper PPE use chart, proper hand washing guidelines, infection control measures, return to work guidelines, how to quarantine and self-isolate guidelines, and even coaching. And this is actually, Christine has put this together for the Mount Abram athletes we have been actively having our athletes participate for the past 6 weeks. And then the last page has a bunch of videos to provide people with information as far as how to wear masks, social distancing, hand washing, how to stop the spread of germs, knowing your risks, symptoms, key times to wear masks, how to stop the spread, Q&E for children who may not understand what COVID-19 is, just when to stay home, and then there are the links that we have for the DOE framework, as well as our own COVID-19 links.
I think that you did a fantastic job with that. It's a lot of information. Thank you.
Would it be useful for families to get some kind of the self-check symptom checklist? To get something that's a little more user-friendly than just hitting a link?
Yeah, one of the administrators, I can't remember who it was this right now, but one of the administrators had suggested, this is great, and it's very comprehensive. Dr. Dave and I've talked about it several times, how comprehensive it is. The issue is it's comprehensive.
Nobody's going to.
And it's 19 pages long. So what we're entertaining the idea of, if this is adopted by the board, what we will then go through is make a one-page, similar to what I just did for the board, bulleted items as far as these are the key things you should know about our health plan. Please refer to the document for additional, but we certainly can make things like the checklist, more readily available, things that people may need hands-on that may, as opposed to not everyone needs to know what Jared's tech department has to do around COVID-19, but they may want to know what are some symptoms that are of COVID-19. So yes, we certainly can make a smaller packet of the quick hit things, if you will.
Anybody else have any questions?
That'd be great. Good.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to accept the health and safety expectations?
Are we doing all that under action items? This is just.
It isn't, if you want to go through all the discussion, the way I set the agenda up was to go through everything and then make it, but you already approved the calendar. So.
Right. I don't know if we can wait and do them both under action, that's fine.
Okay.
Next.
Do you want a motion or not?
No, we'll wait and do it
Okay.
under action items.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
All right.
Okay, Academic models. All our plans that we looked at, now I'll get into the green, yellow, and red designation and things of that nature, but regardless of what the plan was that we were looking at, we tried to keep into mind these type of things that have great impact on anything you try to create. Transportation is a huge one. There are a lot of plans that would be great in nature, but it would require us to transport students, make 3 runs in the morning. And when you're talking 90 minutes in some cases, you wouldn't have kids arriving to school till noon. So transportation limitations based on how many kids you can put on the bus was primary, was one of the big ones, because if you can't get them there, you can't implement your plan. Staffing considerations, how many kids can we have in a classroom? How many students can we safely put in a classroom? We had to look at class sizes, and they vary from every building. So how many, because we can get, I'm making this up, but if we could get, maybe we can get 15 kids at Kingfield into a room, but we can only get 12 at Strong. So that's not universal, because our schools aren't universal in size. We took survey information we gathered from parents, guardians, and staff. We took that, we looked at that after we made our plans and went back and how does this impact what we're trying to do. I've been in ongoing conversations with local superintendents, primarily Spruce and Mount Blue because of our connection with Foster Tech, but we've been in bi-weekly meetings talking about our plans. We can only have so many dissimilar days, although I think those will be waived, but anytime we look at making a change to our instruction, it can impact what Mount Blue's calendar looks like or what Spruce's calendar looks like, so we had to keep that in mind. I've met almost weekly with the Western Maine Superintendent's Association and the Kennebec Valley Superintendent's Association. State agencies, we've got a bunch of guidance from them. We take into account, this has already been brought up once today, childcare and supervision impact of students. Middle school student, I know there's some parents that don't even feel comfortable perhaps with those students being alone, but a middle school, high school student is a little bit different than a pre-K to 4 student as far as what they may or may not be able to do as far as self-supervision. And food, we had to take into account food service. How do we feed these kids? So those were all considerations for our academic models that we took into account. The state came out with 3 color codes. I'm sure everybody's aware of this: green, yellow, and red. And it kind of created some discussion when the state finally came out and said, well, everybody's green. That really generated some discussion against my colleagues. But just so you'll know what these designations are, just because it's green, I think people initially had a thought, well, everyone can go back, good to go. That's not the case. You still have to adhere to the guidelines. As long as you can adhere to the guidelines, you can bring students back for in-person instruction. All that is telling us is that the risk is relatively low. And we should consider in-person instruction as long as we're able to stick with the health and safety guidelines. The fact that we're identified green, or any location that identified green, doesn't mean they can necessarily implement it, because you have things like I just mentioned on the previous page. You have transportation issues, especially rural school districts with the distance that we have to transport. And our health and safety requirements may prevent a green implementation. Yellow is, for just the county designation, indicates that there's a higher level risk. And that additional models should be considered to reduce the risk of possible spread. And then red, which as I said earlier, there's no red or yellow counties identified in the state. Red is there's a high risk of spread, so in-person instruction is not advisable. We were guided by DOE to generate a plan for each one of these models. And then the board tonight will determine which of the models we will implement. The reason we have to generate 3 is it's possible, hopefully it won't happen, but it's possible that in December the CDC could come out, and the DOE could come out and say Franklin County is now red. And if they do that, we would have to be able to seamlessly transition to remote instruction. So we have to have these plans in place. Now granted, once the board makes a decision, hopefully this evening, our primary focus will be on what do we now need to do to make that plan work. So to be able to sit here and say that at the high school, if we go with a yellow model, this is what the exact day is going to look like, we can't say that yet, because we're still going to have to pull stakeholders around the table and find out what tweaks do we have to make whatever plan we decide to go with work. We've got an overview of what the plan will look like, but the fine-tuning of it will take some time. Those 5 days that we built into the calendar are a prime example of how those may be used. So it's a work in progress. And we may come up with the best plans, and then we implement it, and we just say, this is not working. It's not in the best interest of our staff, our students, or whatever. And we may have to go back to the drawing board and tweak it as we go along. As I continue to say, these are, whatever documents we approve, they're going to be works in progress. And anytime, we may not even be able to come to the board, so I would ask the board to understand that. I may have to keep the board informed of adjustments and changes, but they may have to occur as we just get into the trenches. This is the survey information that we got from our pre-K to 8 schools based on preference. Now, this was before, obviously, any plan is unveiled. We have to plan for every student to be back. That's just the way we have to plan, because it's possible it could happen. Is it realistic it will happen? Probably not. But we have to be prepared to educate all our students in whatever model we promote. So to help us to, in our design process, we sent out kind of a feeler. Is this set in stone? It isn't. The survey returns were not very high in some cases. But it gives us, at least from what we did get back from families, it gives us a little bit of flavor of what people are feeling. So if you look at Phillips, for example, we got 38% of the families returned the survey. Of those, their first choice, 64%, was to come back green. 58% was to return with a yellow. Remote, you see the numbers there. Also on there was homeschool and change districts. Maybe 74 is offering something that someone likes better, and they request a superintendent's agreement. I should say, I'm going to go off on a little tangent here, superintendent agreements have been interesting. I've been getting a lot more of them approved from other districts. And some of that may be because of class sizes. At this point, I've approved, up to about a week and a half ago, I had approved superintendent's agreements. I've stopped approving them at this point until we see because we have to educate our students first. So I have stopped signing superintendent's agreements unless it was someone who has already been with us. It isn't fair for a child who's been with us for 6 years to say, no, you can't come because of COVID. So at this point, I'm holding off on signing any additional superintendent's agreements until we see what our class sizes look like. That's good, but it's also bad because, as you know, it counts for our students' count down the road for our ED 279. So it can hurt us in the long run, but it's what we have to do right now. But those were 2 other options which didn't seem relevant for me to include to share with you now because the numbers were so low. Kingfield had a 62% response, and you can see their numbers. Again, 42% were for the green, 52% for the yellow. Those are their top 2. Strong had 63% return, 57% green, 53% yellow, and then MTA did a first and second choice, and you can see there 56% were a hybrid model and 44% were green. As we looked at these, a green model may not satisfy people who would prefer a yellow, but a yellow model may satisfy people who went to green. So there's more likelihood that a green preference would be acceptable to a yellow preference than perhaps the opposite would be true. So we took that into consideration as we were doing it. Our staff also has, are important stakeholders. They're important to what are their feelings. So this is the staff. Christy Mittman is the one who did this and shared these results with me. But it's important to see what their feelings are. They had 67 respondents. So in a green scenario, where you're trying to get everybody back to the best that you can, 24% were 22.4 were completely comfortable with that. 22.4 were somewhat. 19.4 were somewhat uncomfortable, and 35.8% were not comfortable at all with the green scenario. Yellow scenario, the hybrid, we had 28.4% were completely comfortable, 35.8% were somewhat, 17.9% were somewhat uncomfortable, and then a small percentage, 17.9% were not comfortable at all. And then with a red scenario, the complete remote, 40.3 were completely, 25.4 were somewhat comfortable, somewhat uncomfortable, 19.4, and 14.9% were not comfortable at all. So we took, we take that into account as well.
How many staff were sent the survey?
Were they all, Christy? What was told?
I sent it to, I believe, I sent it to 61 staff, the teaching staff.
Only the teaching staff?
Right, the teachers. However, it ended up accidentally going to some of the ed tech. So we ended up with 67 people who responded. So
Okay, all right. So not really much in the way of support staff, teachers only response. Okay.
Well, that's what this one was, yes.
Okay.
And we have 61 total teachers, is that every teacher got it?
Well, now, any new hires, I didn't have any information on that, so I didn't put those out. I guess I'm saying, these are the staff I know. I mean, worked here at the end of last year.
And I thank Christy for doing that. And I did meet with the ECC last week to talk about, to hear teachers' concerns and things as we did develop these plans. We obviously want to work closely with everybody involved to make this the best possible situation that we can in a very difficult situation.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the numbers, they scare me a little bit, and I'm not sure that you can really, disclose that, but.
Well, and the
Other
thing.
teachers' major concerns, just that we're not going to be ready.
Well, and the thing is with this scenario, and Christy, you might want to chime in, as I looked at these numbers, a red scenario, or some of the scenarios where a person said they're not comfortable, it may be that they're not, it's not that they're not comfortable returning, they're not comfortable with that particular scenario.
And that's why the survey was a little bit,
yeah.
there was a gray
Yeah.
area there, like,
Yeah.
okay, I just want a full return.
Yeah, there could be someone,
They want a
yep.
full return.
Yeah, I mean, someone who says they're not at all comfortable at all in this particular scenario could just say, no, I want green. I'm not comfortable with yellow. So I mean, it's not necessarily stating, the survey did go into a little more detail, providing some information about people's feelings about coming back to school. So that gives us a little bit more. But I think a lot of people are going to wait, until we know what the model is, we won't really know exactly what our numbers are. It's once we land on a model, then we'll get much more concrete information from our students and families, and we'll get much more concrete information from our students.
Kristen?
One thing I was going to say is that when this went out too, we didn't have the complete health and safety one. So some of those were based on, are masks going to be required, or are they not? I mean, so some of it was a bit like that. We were just trying to get a feel of that.
These were all very preliminary. They were helpful, but they were preliminary.
So we've not done a survey or any questionnaire to staff, and I'm saying classroom teachers primarily, to see if there are any who are definitely not planning to come.
No, if they're not, once we come down with a model, I will share the model with the entire staff, and then what I will do, I'm going to ask the teachers on an individual basis. They'll have to reach out to me and speak with me if for some reason they feel they cannot return to work. If we have staff who feel they cannot return to work, my first challenge will be to try to find what accommodations can we do to allow them to be able to return and work in some capacity within the district. Then there are a whole bunch of avenues that we may have to go down if there is just a reason that people can't return to work. Family medical leave, there are a couple of leaves out there. So that is really going to be in an individual case-by-case scenario.
I'm just concerned that you haven't, and I'm not saying you in particular, I just mean that has not been out there yet.
And I really think it's going to be whatever scenario we finally end on. And once they know the model, I think then that's when people will make those decisions and have to reach out to me.
So it does talk about the yellow scenario. So at some level, there was awareness, maybe not.
Of the academic.
Yeah.
The academic one, we were able to kind of share.
Well, I rolled out the academic one was the one that I thought would generate the most discussion, and I'd need the most feedback from people like Christy. So that was put out first. So their survey went out, and they had some, if I'm wrong, just tell me, Christy, but they probably had some questions about the math, about that whole document. I just went through that 19-page document. They probably had questions and concerns about that, but that document hadn't been created yet. So when they did their survey, it was just based on the academic, not knowing what the safety and health was going to look like. Now that document has been created, so this could change if we submitted the survey again.
Right, and it could, but dealing with what we have in front of us, that whole kind of thing, if we were to vote tonight and say yellow, and 18%, just using 18%, 17.9% of teachers can't do it.
Well, there's a difference between can't do it and don't feel comfortable doing it.
Well, right.
Not feeling comfortable is not a reason to not come to work. if you have a medical reason, or you have one of the identified factors based on COVID, that is a reason not to.
Right, and my job isn't to
Right,
decide
yeah.
what
No, that'd
is
be mine.
and isn't their reason for not coming, but I'm just saying, we're looking at not at all comfortable, so I'll use that language.
Yep.
Not at all comfortable, and to have to have to try to replace, to have substitutes, long-term substitutes in those classrooms isn't really conducive to kids learning what they need to learn. You know what I mean? If you can't make whatever accommodation, if you can't, like,
I think that this information honestly is outdated if they didn't have full plans. So it's hard to look at these numbers and extrapolate them onto what we're looking today because this was given out well before this was ever presented to them. So with all this information, that could change these results drastically.
and I understand that, but we're gonna vote on something and we don't really have any.
I will say the numbers,
That-
that's inevitable, you're gonna have to make a decision not knowing what the ramifications of that may be. But I will say in that document that Christie shared, I did not share all of it. There was identification of staff who may or may not be coming back, and the numbers were not, as far as not coming back, were not nearly that high. So, at this point, that's not,
What is our normal, I'm gonna try to do this, but like, I'm sure that there's a limitation on how many, like, leaves of absences we would give out in a year. Like, we couldn't have 20 teachers in a normal year, not a COVID year, in a normal year. We would not approve, I'm assuming, 10 long-term.
No.
So what is our normal number of
I had one military leave last year, and I think that's the only one that, I mean, we've had medical leaves and things like that, but as far
But
as.
is there a number? Is there that you would not go past?
This year, probably 0. But, I mean, I don't know,
But you know what
Christie,
I'm saying?
I know
Like
what you're saying.
5 years ago, would a superintendent say, I'm not giving out 4?
Well, I mean, you have to look at the impact it's going to have on your instructional institution.
May depend on your position.
Yeah, it may depend on position, there's a bunch of factors that come into play.
There are contractual agreements.
Yeah.
Right. So there isn't a
No.
actual,
No.
I just wouldn't want to surpass that, I guess, in a COVID year.
No, I'm going to work hard to get everybody back so that they feel comfortable.
And I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that you will. I'm just,
It's the hand we've been doing.
yeah.
And I'm sure they all know what an impact it would have on the budget or not, if they weren't here, what it would cost this.
Oh, and even if people are out on family medical leave and some of those leaves, we're still responsible for paying a portion of their salary. On top of whatever cost it will incur to try to get someone to replace them. So it's very impactful. Sure. So the academic models. And again, this initial stuff is a lot of the stuff I've already provided to you, so I'm gonna scan through it. You've already seen most of this stuff and the bulleted parts that I've already gone through. I'm gonna jump right down to our green scenario. That's the in-person. Students would attend school on a regular 5-day-a-week in-person schedule following the health and safety requirements. In order to make this full plan work, we entertained several ideas. What you see are 3. In one of the malls, we had 7 that we eventually narrowed down because it was just too cumbersome. We went very radical. In one of the green scenarios, we talked about moving all the K to 4 students into one building in the district, all the 5 to 8 in another building, or I missed the group there. 3 to we had 3. Our 3 buildings became grade specific versus town specific, and in many ways that would have helped us with staffing issues, but it obviously created some logistical nightmares. So we took that one off the table. But what does this allow us to do? It allows us to keep our students in their own schools. We may need to adjust classroom spaces because of class sizes. We might need to take the music room or the gymnasium or the cafeteria and turn that into a learning space. And at this point, any of the administrators are in the room, please chime in if I miss something. We may need to take our ed techs from classroom support and from special education to provide small group instruction for our students. It's a staffing issue. We could use our COVID funds through December 20th, our educational technicians, additional ed techs. We have the plan to build a lot of additional hours and staff support into our plan. The problem is, similar to the point that was just being made, you can have the position, but will you be able to fill the positions? That's a question. But the COVID, that's the CARES funds that go, the COVID funds go through the 20th, that's the CRF funds. We are tweaking our funding a little bit, so our grants a little bit, so that we can extend beyond, as I said earlier, that December deadline. The goal is to maintain specialist classes. When I say specialist classes, I'm talking phys ed, art, music, things of that nature. And understanding their instructional spaces may be utilized, so they may not have the gym for phys ed. So how could that occur? When you go outside, that's fine, but January, that would be difficult. It would require us to double our transportation routes because we just can't fit all our kids on the bus. So we would add 2 additional runs, which obviously would have a huge impact financially based on the hours of the drivers, also based on the wear tear, the fuel usage of our buses. Keep in mind our bus drivers in many cases are our custodians, so it would also impact our ability to clean our buildings. And it would also impact the arrival time. It would generate some challenging scheduling dilemmas because you would have students arriving perhaps 90 minutes after students prior to them. So what would the day look like?
But this is more for Scott. I know some buses definitely have a lot more on them, the runs. Have you looked at kind of revamping the routes a little bit to accommodate more students? Because I know that there's some that have 6 or 7, and some that are a full load sometimes. So
We'd have to look at that.
yeah,
It's a challenge, especially if you're running 3 runs. And we do actually ask parents to bring them in if they can, to give us the spaces on these buses. But restructuring runs in rural areas is difficult. Not impossible, but difficult.
and one more thing, as a parent, I just want to know, if we say, okay, I can bring my kid, but what if there are some days that we just can't? How do we, will you stop? I don't know. how that's-
That would be based on what we've tried to tackle that question.
Do I just have them stand in the middle of the road?
That question has come. No, that question has come up. If we designate all these spaces, and we're talking assigned seats on the bus, if we designate all these spaces, what does happen in a situation like that? And that's one of those. Here we have an answer to a question. Now we've got 2 more questions. But that is something that we would look at. I know Scott's looked at the bus runs and trying to move kids and make sure that we get the biggest bang for our buck on the buses. But that's one of those questions that until we presented with it.
Was that one of the questions, transportation in the survey that went out? Was there an answer?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. A good portion of our students, our parents are going to look at transporting initially. I can see that once the initial fear subsides, that there may be an increased demand for transportation. So we want to keep that in the front. Like I said, we're planning to transport every student in the district, knowing that we won't have to. I will say in this district, compared to my previous district, our buses are pretty full. A lot of kids, and where I was before, the buses were pretty empty. But in this district, the buses are pretty full. The additional food service hours and spacing, obviously we can only feed so many kids at a time and locations, so there would be an increase to our food service budget as well. And we are, no matter what plan we have, we are planning on bringing our nurses into the building. Get nurses, if we can, we'll bring our current existing nurses into the buildings that they are in now for a longer period of time. If we can't, if for some reason that nurse can't do that, we will look at bringing in an additional nurse from some other area or a medical provider. We just think it's important, no matter what model, unless it's red, obviously, that we have nurses on site, because it's challenging enough for an administrative assistant or administrator to assume that role of a nurse with things like medication distribution or fever checks and things like that in a normal school year. This is certainly not normal, and the medical concerns are much more significant, so we really need trained medical personnel on site. And the as we broke this down by grade spans as well, pre-K to 8 interventions will be used to staff larger groups. This may mean a reduction in things like our reading recovery services. And obviously, schedules may have to be altered to minimize transition. We want kids going through the building as little as possible. At the high school, the impact of this could mean that because we have classes that are mandatory, that students have to take to graduate, we would need more sections of those, which would mean elimination of some of our electives. Because our teachers who teach those core classes, those classes that are necessary, also teach some of our electives, and if we're pulling them to teach more content, or more of the required courses for graduation, they wouldn't be able to teach the electives, so it would have an impact on them. No matter what plan we go with, we do know there's a portion of families who will not feel comfortable sending students back to school if it's green or yellow. So we are saying that families can apply. There's a form at the end of this document for a virtual learner, so space as a virtual learner. We're going to work hard to provide the virtual learning to the best we can. Obviously, our goal is to educate all our students. Things that may impact that are the number. If it was an extremely high number, we would look at moving perhaps a person from a classroom setting to a remote setting. Connectivity. We can provide students with hotspots and devices, but if they're in a location that they just don't have internet connection, that would impact their ability to receive that. But we are going to ask that they identify a pathway and remain in that pathway for a period of time. We really can't have a student coming in person one week and then deciding they want to go virtual the next week. So we really need, for planning and curriculum design, we need to know which students are going to be in which pathway. And at a certain period of time, we'll review it. And then maybe the student wants to come into in-person instruction, and we'll allow them to do that. Maybe the person who's in person wants to go out, and we'll allow that. Regardless, there will be no virtual learning for our pre-K students. We just can't. That's not a mandated grade level to educate, and it's the challenges outweigh what benefits we might be able to provide for a pre-K student. K to 4. Virtual learning will be provided by a designated remote K to 4 teacher for these grade bands. So a teacher may be teaching K, or they would be teaching students that may fall from K level all the way to 4th grade level. It may be a teacher from Kingfield teaching a population of students remotely from Strong, Phillips, and Kingfield, based on the need. What might that look like? There could be live lessons, there could be packets, there could be hands-on materials provided. Our specialist, I know that our phys ed people put out a video last year. I think Kavika's here. There was a video put out on YouTube. So our specialists would have to be creative on how they provide that to their students remotely. And as I said, this pathway would be, at the K to 4 level, it would be for a trimester period of time. Now, keeping in mind, whatever plan we're in, if all of a sudden something just suddenly changes, we're going to make whatever adjustments we have to make for the best interest of our students. 5 to 8 virtual learning, again, would be similar format. We have a remote learning teacher that's 5 through 8. Again, this teacher will provide all the learning, do all the parent communication. It could be live lessons, it could be packets, hands-on materials. Again, specials provided by teachers remotely and would accommodate the students' needs. And again, this pathway would be for the trimester. And then high school changes just a little bit. It would be done through video conferencing, live classes. Families select this pathway, and that would run for a semester.
Just a question on the K4 and the 5-8 remote situations. Are you anticipating, and I know you can't anticipate right now because people haven't had a chance to decide, but one teacher or 2 teachers or whomever, however many you need, would they work with students across the district or just in one?
Across the district, the administrators did the best they could. We met all day yesterday in an admin retreat, and they had gone through, and to the best of their ability, they had calculated from the surveys, and again, how valuable that survey may or may not be, the numbers, and I think we were looking at 1 teacher for each grade span right now is what would be able to satisfy what we had for initial.
2 teachers.
2 teachers, 1 for each grade.
And those teachers would be located
on site.
Wherever they're building.
Wherever they're building, their house building. We wouldn't make a teacher from Strong go to Phillips or Now, this may be a teacher who has a compromised immune system. This gets back to the question about what if someone can't return to work? It may be someone in that situation that we put into a position of that nature. In that case, could we make an accommodation for them to be in a building, or would it be more, responsible for them to work remotely? That would be something we'd have to decide. Maybe we don't have an individual in that situation, or we had a teacher who had a great experience with remote learning and would like to continue to work on remote learning, so we could put out a questionnaire, is there anyone who would be interested in this position? So that would be ways we would address it, the staffing. That's the green model.
So I'm confused. So you said they would be on site unless there was a medical issue?
The goal is to have all teachers on site, regardless of what model we're using, unless of course it's, well, even with the red, it was asked earlier if they could be on site even in red, that can be possible as well. All right, hybrid instruction. This is where we have a portion of our students receiving in-person instruction and as well as remote instruction. This decreases the number of students on our buses, it decreases our class sizes, it allows more opportunity for cleaning of our facilities, grounds, and transportation, and this does guarantee us adherence with the DOE and CDC guidelines. What might the impact be? We may need to prioritize full in-person or increased return for special populations. What that means is with the model we're proposing, students would be in the building 2 days a week, out of the building 2 days a week remotely, and then 1 day a week would be used for a variety of online professional development, a variety of different opportunities, more time for custodial staff to clean our buildings and things like that. There may be students who we deem it's in their best interest to bring them in for that day. So there may be a population of students that need that additional support of in-person instruction or support, so there's a possibility that will give us flexibility to do that as well. Special schedules would need to be adjusted, obviously, because they go on an alternating day schedule, and if you have a day that breaks up that rhythm, and there's students that normally receive their specials on a day that we wouldn't be in session, they would lose that, so we certainly don't want them to lose that. So these are the kind of fine-tuning things I'm talking about if this was a model that we would have to do. We may need to adjust our transportation schedules a little bit, and again, we may need to adjust food service. This is the same thing. They could apply for virtual learning. Pre-K, there would be no virtual learning. The virtual learning, I'm looking around, I think this stayed pretty consistent. The virtual learning was the same in green as well as yellow, so everything that I just mentioned in green would be repeated here. The difference would be the time that students spent face-to-face with their instructors. So for pre-K, be 28 hours every 2 weeks, and those are the days of the week they would happen. It would be 2 full days a week, and that's currently what they're getting. So the pre-K would not be altered that much. For our K to 4, the face-to-face time would be 56 hours every 2 weeks. Our K to 4 students would be in the school Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. I was already asked by a board member earlier, why would K to 4 students be in the building 4 days a week when our other population of students are only in 2 days a week? This is where we took into the account the students who supervise themselves, daycare concerns, the needs, the educational needs of students at this level, the need for that direct in-person instruction being a little more significant. The remote learning effectiveness or our availability to remote learning for that population it's much more of a challenge than it is for middle school, high school students. So that's why those students would be 4 days a week. Our 5 to 8 students would be 28 hours every 2 weeks of in-person instruction. The class would be broken down into 2 cohorts. You take a class and you break it right down the middle. So they would be in the building for instruction on Mondays, Thursdays, and then they would be out of the building on Tuesdays, Fridays when the other cohort is in the building.
How does that work with the kids who go to foster staff?
Foster Tech's going to be its own little entity. So Shelley and Christina are going to work on that. In my meeting with Foster Tech, with the superintendents, there are 2 possible scenarios out there. One would be that the Foster Tech kids would attend their Foster Tech classes in person and do all their other instruction remotely. Here in 58, the administration would prefer to have them in the building whenever possible, so their schedules would have to be adjusted, that they would do their Foster Tech thing faithfully, and then their schedule for the academics could be built around that.
The pre-K thing, is there a reason why you like split them up on either side of that Wednesday?
Because Wednesday is going to be our day that nobody's
No.
going to be.
On either side of the Wednesday, because Wednesday's like the extra cleaning, like, instead of like Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, Friday, the other side, am I
K-4 students are all going to be here.
right?
There's not going to be two
Pre-K.
cohorts.
Pre-K, don't you have one group is Monday, Thursday, and the other one is Tuesday?
Yeah, I think that's because, was that the
No,
original?
all schools currently have 2 days a week of
Okay.
pre-K, so in the pre-K model, it's the same group that comes Monday and Thursday. The whole pre-K is there. Down below, it is where we switch into cohort A is Monday, Thursday, cohort B is Tuesday, Friday. Pre-K is for the different schools.
Thank you.
And I will say our pre-K numbers are down, which doesn't surprise me, because obviously it's you know, kids start school, kindergarten, our pre-K is a certain, you know, something we provide, but they don't have to attend pre-K, so I can see parents being a little more cautious.
They don't have to attend K, do they?
Pre-K doesn't. Well, K even, yeah.
K is not mandatory, right? It's first grade that they,
Joe's nodding.
You're correct.
thank you.
So the cohort for the 5 to 8, and then our cohort for the high school, again, broken down by the cohorts. And C could be, again, that additional day could be used for RTI and things of that nature. Wednesdays, what would Wednesdays look like? We picked Wednesdays because it's the middle of the week. We thought it would be a good time to clean our facilities out. A lot of our professional, we had built, if you remember the calendar, had built some early release Wednesdays in for professional development, so it impacts the days that we had already interrupted instruction, if you will. So that's why we picked the Wednesdays. What would happen? Teachers would be able to do remote classes, they'd be able to make family contact, provide individual one-on-one support with students who may be struggling from either last year or the start of this year. They could have office hours, and then it would afford them some opportunity. We're going to need ongoing professional development because as we implement new technology, new platforms, there are going to be things that pop up that we just need to address as we go along. So that's what Wednesday would look like.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So is there no classroom or no formal classroom instruction, so will it not count as a student day?
It does count as a seat day as long as we're reaching out to them and interacting with them verbally remotely. As long as we're having interaction with our students and providing them the opportunity for support and things of that nature. It's similar to what we did during our remote learning last year.
So it will be class time?
Yeah, it'll be seat day. And I should say, this is a good point, I think it comes up in the red. In case it doesn't come up in the red scenario, what remote learning looked like last year and what it will look like this year is two totally different things. So that is the yellow model, that's the hybrid model. And then the red model, that is complete remote instruction. So students would be receiving instruction from home, but this is where I was talking about, unlike March 13th last year where the whole approach was do no harm. So students really stayed pretty much at wherever they were in their grades and things of that nature. If they chose to participate, it was great, we encouraged them to. But if they didn't, there wasn't really penalties or it didn't impact grades perhaps in some cases. That would not be the case this year. There would certainly be much more rigor, there would be expectations for attendance, there would be expectations for participation while you're attending, and there would be graded assignments. So it certainly would have an academic impact. I'm hoping we don't have to go to red, but we never know. So this is a breakdown, a pretty comprehensive breakdown that I have to give credit to the pre-K to 8 administrators. They met and they crafted these documents that you have, so I just roll them up is what it may look like. And again, this may change, but you can see some of the challenges. As one of the big conversations that came up is we really can't expect a pre-K to K or even a lower elementary kid to sit in front of a computer for 6 hours a day. Whereas a high school student may be able to transition through their normal schedule, bouncing from class to class, because that's just the nature of the learner. So this is a breakdown of what it may look like as far as what materials we may need, what live instruction may need to occur, and how students will be assessed. Did you get your answer to your question? on the standards?
No, I just, it's wording.
Okay.
Where it says Power School Standards, I'm looking at Joe, isn't it content standards, or is it really Power School standards?
Just that they will be entered in Power School for pre-K through 8 last spring. Trimester 3 was not recorded in Power School. We used an alternate mode. So yes, it is the content standards. It's just the vehicle. They will be recorded there.
I have a question though while I have the floor. How long is the contractual day?
7:45 to 2:45. 3 o'clock, sorry. Okay.
So on all of these though, it says teachers will be available for 6 hours, 8 to 2?
In that we have the duty-free lunch and planning time.
Right, I mean, it's to give planning time during, if we're fully remote, that they also need planning time. So they're working their full day, but we need to build in some planning and meeting time for them.
Thank you.
That's pre-K. Does anyone have a need for me to read everything out of each of these columns, or is it being displayed? Good enough? Okay. The 1 to 2 model. And you'll see some repetition, obviously, as we're still within a similar grade span. Just keep rolling through. 3 to 4. Obviously, it gets a little more, the assessments become a little greater.
Is any of our CRF money tied to any of these plans? Or no matter what plan we choose, we're going to get our CRF money?
Yes. And to be honest with you, most of the stuff we're looking at purchasing through CRF or CARES Act would be applicable to any of these plans.
Is there hypothetical, if we're yellow, if that's what we choose to, is there a thought process of what takes us to red? Like what would be the?
What am I guessing, as from where I sit right
I
now?
understand.
Things that could take us to red?
Correct.
A possible confirmed case of COVID-19, depending on the contact tracing, as far as what impact that had, I guess could take us to a red.
Would it shut down the district or would it shut down the building?
I think it would depend on the nature of the exposure.
Yeah.
Obviously, we will consult with medical specialists for any decision that we make around that type of, and DOE and CDC. The state could come out and say you need to go red. I mean, those are the two primary things that come to mind. Those are the two that really jump out at me right now. 5 to 8. And then I know Shelley and Christina put together a 9 to 12 here. I know they're really looking at what scheduling may look like at the high school next year. I know there's talk about, instead of going and alternating, if they're going to have 2 cohorts, one of their thoughts, and I'm sure they're going to have discussions that they haven't already with their staff, was maybe going to instead of a 4-period schedule, an 8-period schedule. That way you cut half your cohort one day and half your cohort the other day. I know they're going to be meeting next week with staff, so I'm not 100% sure where they stand with that right now. But each grade span is going to have to do something a little unique to make it. But this is the red scenario. I'm sorry, that was the yellow I was talking about. So the red is set here. This is the document that I will ask people to sign and fill out if they are going to pursue a virtual pathway. This is the one that had that window of time. We would ask them to stay locked into it. We did have a population of our respondents who said regardless, that was their first choice, of virtual pathways. So we want to be able to provide them the education they need. We also have to be prepared to provide virtual learning for students who may test positive, or they may have symptoms, or they may have gone to Massachusetts and have to quarantine for 14 days, so they need the remote pathway while they're out for a brief period of time. That's the difference. That's not the same thing as bouncing back and forth between one pathway or the other. That's an exception that we make based on individual student situations.
Jess?
So what do we have in place for students that don't have internet access to do remote learning?
Virtual learning,
Yep.
we can only do so much. We can, hard packets are part of the virtual learning possibility. That's one of the things that when I went through what virtual learning looked like, it was a component that could be part of virtual learning. So that is an option. But as far as being able to tap into the technology stuff that we have, if they don't have, solid connectivity, there's not a lot we can do. We won't leave them high and dry, but it just won't be the exact same virtual pathway that others are receiving.
So I'm curious, since the administrative team has done the majority of the work, if they have a preferred recommendation?
Yep,
Or if they want to say anything about?
I will put it out there, and then I will open the floor up to the administrators, but I would strongly encourage the board to go with the yellow hybrid model. Based on all the discussions we've had as an administrative team, we think that best meets the educational needs while taking into account all the health and safety things that we have to do for students and staff. Knowing that, I go back to the survey, even though we know how much thought can be put into that. The yellow kind of appeases the green to a degree, but the green may not appease the yellow. But also it leaves us a window of opportunity open to make an adjustment if we have to. A neighboring district had a plan similar to this in place and decided to go to an alternating day schedule 5 days a week. We could do that. That is something we could, after we go through this process, if we say, hey, it's going well, we can go to a schedule. That was one of the actual discussion items that we had, was having the whole district go on a schedule like the high school does, a blue gold schedule. But one of the big concerns was the challenges that might provide for daycare, because if you're not familiar with how the high school model works, they would have 5 class meetings every 2 weeks. But 1 week it would be 3 days a week, and the next week it would be 2 days a week, and it continues to alternate in that
I think it's
format.
important for the younger ones to have for all of them actually, for parents to know which days your students
That's what we thought.
are going and not
Yeah.
have to choose.
That's what we thought. But it does leave us flexibility to morph more into a more green version of yellow, if you will, down the road.
I just have one question,
Yeah.
hopefully we don't have to use the red scenario,
Yep.
but on all of them, it says Monday through Thursday are the instructional days.
In the red plan,
In the red.
which is similar to what we did in the spring, giving the Friday for professional development day, and then teachers did one-on-one meetings, catch up, those sort of things. But the regular classes were scheduled on Monday through Thursday, the regular live sessions.
So why the transition to the Monday through Thursday instead of Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday?
That was, I'll be honest with you, that was one of the original format or the proposal that we came up with, was have the 2 cohorts, the cohort meet Monday, Tuesday, and the other one meet Thursday, Friday. Excuse me. The big concern, and it was a concern I had, was that the gap in time between...
No, I
Oh.
just worded it very
Oh,
wrong, sorry.
that's
So
okay.
like the yellow scenario is the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday with Wednesday.
Yeah.
Being the PD
Yep.
reach out day. Wouldn't it be easier for families if you have to transition into red to have Wednesday remain the day that?
Oh, we could certainly do that.
Going
Oh, yeah.
to Friday?
Yep. I mean, any little tweaks like that, that's in the best interest, and if people have plans already, for childcare and things of that nature, we're going to work to accommodate people the best we can. So if it's a tweak of something of that nature, we certainly could do that.
But I just want to clarify again, because when I asked about yellow and Wednesdays being instructional days, they are instructional days, right?
Will attendance be taken on Wednesdays?
No, because it's not it's an opportunity for staff to work individually with students. They may not have their entire class setting that day. They may have students coming in to work with. There'll be remote pack, they'll have work they'll be doing on that day remotely, so there is work expectation they'll have. But as far as attendance of the entire students, no, I don't believe so.
Well, are we counting it as a seat day or? We don't have attendance for that.
Maybe a question I have to ask.
I'm concerned they're gonna think Wednesday's a day off.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that
No.
about teachers, I mean that about students.
No, and
because
that's the
they
reason.
disengage
yeah.
if they're not required to.
And that's the reason that when we first bridged this, and I look at Christie because of the discussion we had, the question was, well, could staff work remotely on that day? And that's when I said, no, staff will be in the buildings 5 days a week. It provides them an opportunity to, for that perception. I don't want people driving by on Wednesdays and seeing parking lots empty.
So do we have to provide a meal on Wednesday?
I wish Dora was here. I'm assuming we would do the pickup similar to what we're doing. Yeah, I would say yes. I'll answer that, that we would, because we're doing it now. We're doing a 5-day-a-week pickup on Tuesdays, or we have been, I think last Tuesday was the last Tuesday of that. But we do have, if we don't provide meal, we can't count it as a seat day.
I think I might wonder if a half day on Wednesdays of mandatory student attendance would be useful, and then the afternoons be used for professional development.
And would you alternate the cohorts every other week?
That would be you guys.
Well, you can't have both. You can't have cohort A and B both on Wednesday.
But wouldn't you have, if it's remote, you wouldn't have them in, you would be
Oh, I see what you're saying.
virtually meeting with them.
Yep.
It might provide a time for students to work
Yep.
collaboratively between cohorts. It might be teacher time in the afternoon or something, but I feel very strongly that we need to have 5 days count toward instruction.
We will make it work.
You will what?
We'll make it work. That's board wishes. I mean, I'm looking to administrators around the room and stuff with Mass.
Steve?
I have a two-parter. Been listening to Jim and Chris. Because I'm a little surprised. I fully expected you to say you wanted to go green, just considering our numbers. But does the rest of the administrative team, are you guys in agreement on that?
Yes.
And what do we think the parents are going to say?
Well, we saw the pie chart, and it was most people wanting green.
Yeah, so now we're going to, you want to go yellow?
Well,
I mean,
no,
if
I'll tell you,
anyone's
I will be honest, and
read
this was not, I shared this with administrators, my goal was to be green. But the limitations of class sizes and transportation just makes it virtually impossible for us to go green.
Isn't she rolling out something else new September 1st?
Oh, we can't wait till September 1st.
I'm asking.
She better be.
You know, and I-
On the 5th.
What happened September 1st?
I think she's saying that the governor's
rolling
going
another phase 4.
to.
It's supposed to roll out September 1st.
You know, and I think that's what, I know, that's what Todd's saying, is that, I mean, this is forever evolving. I mean, it's going to change as we go through.
What it looks like the first day of school and what it may look like in November could be two totally different.
Well, that's true, and I understand, you keep repeating that all this stuff is subject to change. And it's easier to go from bad to better, but, that's one of the big problems with this whole thing we've been going through, is everything changes every day. And not that we have to copy SAD 9, but they did their thing. They did a survey, and then the board made a decision. I've never seen comments on the Bulldog that everyone is, well, not everyone, but, normally you might get 10 comments on a news article. There's, I don't know how many there are, it just scrolls down and everybody's mad. And I know the kids come first, but I just wonder if we're being too cautious.
Can I go back to your comment from a second ago? You said that green was almost impossible for the school.
Based on our schools, our size, our spacing that we have to adhere to, and primarily transportation.
Then how is it even a viable plan in here? Why is it presented if it's not?
Because we had to present a plan, and that's the best thing that we have. Whether we can do it or not, we have to present a plan.
I just don't get, if it's impossible, it's not really a
plan.
Well, it's not impossible.
It's not impossible. I mean, we could have students arrive, well, it's not impossible if you want students arriving at school at noon, and you want staff in your building for 12 hours. It's not impossible. There's nothing that's impossible. There are things that are extremely difficult and, yeah. And I mean, you got contractual issues. I mean, we'd be looking at hiring additional staffing, which I don't even know if the COVID monies would cover the additional staffing we would probably need.
So we really don't have much of a choice.
We really don't. I told you a few minutes ago, green was what I
It's like
was.
the budget all over again.
Green was what I was hoping for.
Does it, now, classroom size, I mean, are we talking, do you guys have to go, basically break it down, go by square footage, by each room to see how many students can fit in each room?
I believe Scott's walked around to every classroom in the
Right.
district.
Is
Yeah.
there a way to do anything, I mean, I know that, like, for instance, my daughter's class, they're going to 6th strong. She's got a huge class, but like
Oh.
others have small. Is there any way to?
I will tell you the way that makes it happen the easiest is we make one of our buildings a pre-K to 2 building. We make one of our buildings a 3 to, I can't remember.
Down as far.
We looked at, and we make Phillips, Mount Abram Middle School, and the 6th through 8th graders all go to Phillips. We make, Kingfield, I think we had looked at, the building and the size. We looked at, Strong is our smallest school as far as class sizes go. So we looked at putting, our classroom sizes, so we looked at putting all our, our lower elementary students in that building, our intermediate students at Kingfield, and our middle school age students at Phillips.
Did you think the biggest problem was that would be transportation?
I think communities would have, anytime you start moving community schools around, I'm just saying, that was a consideration.
But right now, it's,
Transportation was a little bit, Scott, what was the big transportation hiccup with that one?
It would be the staggered start time, because
Yep.
we got picking up kids in Lexington, they're in 7th grade. You have to pick them up, you have to stop here, and then go to Phillips. And it's the opposite on the other end. And I can't change kids on buses unless I have a 15-minute window to wipe down every seat because there's students on the set.
Brenda, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to make a comment about Strong being the smallest, and I have 3, like Serena said, I have 3 very large grades, and I don't have enough room, even at 3 feet, to have them situated. So this was our best option for Strong, is the yellow. But all the administrators, we worked, and we worked also with stakeholders. It wasn't just us. So, like Todd said, we had about 7 or 8 different options, and then we just started whacking away at them as to which is really going to be the best for students and for families and for staff members to do it safely and in a healthy way.
I have another question. Go ahead.
Are we going to have enough devices to distribute to students that need them if we do the remote learning for everyone on Wednesdays?
Jared, where do we stand with that?
That is an issue because there is a back order on Chromebooks and iPads and Windows devices. I mean, Chromebooks are back ordered as far as December for a lot of the vendors. And I wanted to order them earlier, but the funding wasn't there, so we had to wait for all that to go through, and now we're kind of on the tail end of the lists, and so honestly, I don't know if we will have devices
So how
in
many
time.
devices would we be able to supply to students? Would we be able to cover, like, say, grades 5 through 12?
We had enough to cover, I believe it was 3 through 12 that we did in the spring, although not every family chose to take one. But yeah, but if we're going to add K2, we're not going to have those probably in time for school to start. We'll get them eventually, but
We do also have the Samsung devices. We
Yes.
did get about 80 devices in from the state in June that we need to bring online. So I think between us, we think we're fairly close. We also have some families that if we made them aware, do you all have a shared device at home and could you decline one? I think we maybe could make it work. A number of families do have one and might be able to not take a machine.
on the first round.
Right, we could do
I think we get
something,
close.
yeah, we could do something like that, but one-to-one, K-12 isn't gonna happen right now.
We feel pretty confident we'd be really close. And then we did receive, like Joe was saying, those tablets that we received are also hotspots as well as a tablet. So for those with the connectivity, once again, it depends on the cellular service. But like Todd said, we have a device and we have a possible hotspot, and we're doing the best that, I mean, we're rural Maine.
Well, that's kind of where my issue is.
I know.
Well, yeah, because they don't just magically create a network
And I
connection.
have limited internet at my house. We get 20 gigabytes to use for the month. I don't see my child in high school being able to watch 34 minutes, 35 minutes per 4 times a day a teacher teach. I mean, she's gonna get it, and I guess you could say
Say that again?
computer, but that's just not gonna happen up at my house.
Kids in Madrid might as well not even bother to attend school.
Right. I mean, you're talking huge chunks, and I guess, yes, you can give them a packet, and maybe my kid can learn biotechnology through a packet, but she's going to college in a couple of years. I'd kind of like her to have an education.
Do we have any indication of how many parents, if we went green, would choose to do remote learning for their students?
I think more than if we went yellow. I mean, because of the number.
Well, then
Is that
you're taking care of your transportation issue.
Joe?
We do have that data, yes. I think the reality is the return to learning survey we asked parents to complete, they were making a best guess. I think with any of this, we're gonna have to go back out to families and say, now that the plan is X, and the health precautions are Y, do you feel comfortable? I think people need their best guess. And I think each of us had about 30% that didn't return surveys, which could really, that's a lot of kids, you know.
So I mean, hypothetically, if we chose to go green today, we could send out a survey to the parents tomorrow and say, knowing this is our plan, we will choose to do remote learning, and then we could determine the transportation, if there's enough one-to-one technology, et cetera.
I mean, I guess you can do that. It delays our ability to start doing any effective planning for instruction for kids, because if we take that down, you know, I mean, I think what we feel like is the yellow is our best way to make progress, to start the year, to have a plan, that feels safe, that feels doable. If it's going well, I think all of us would love to see kids back more. But I think we'd all like to be successful to start and then increase if we've got the capacity to do it.
I have the same concern as Jeff and as Danica, or Jennifer, is not everyone has the internet at home, and not everyone has a device at home. If we're not 100% positive we're going to have enough devices for the kids, I don't see how that's a viable plan. And a lot of kids are better in class than they are remotely, and there's a lot of parents who work full-time, 5 days a week, who that schedule for daycare is going to be a nightmare for them.
Especially with no daycares in the area.
Instead of asking how many are gonna keep their kids home if it's green, and I know we need to make a decision anyway, but should we be asking how many would rather send their kids to school all the time if we went yellow? Does that make sense? So Jess, if we went yellow, Jess could choose to send her kids as if it was green?
I don't think the yellow allows for that, no.
Great.
Doesn't allow it?
No.
Then how do we allow?
If it went green, you were
The other
able
way
to
if
pull
it's
your
green.
kid out, but if it's yellow, then you can't send your kid. You could go down.
Is there
you can't go more.
somewhere we could have your kids go during the day that has internet?
Not if they're,
Because you're not the only one.
No.
Well, we still can provide the parking lot access at the schools. I
Kids
mean,
get packed out the parking lot.
Yeah.
I'll drop you off at 7:30 and pick you
I
up
understand, I mean,
sometime around 5.
that's, we can still do that, but,
Right.
I do think the virtual piece becomes more of a challenge with a green model, because I think you'll have more people opting for that than if we go with the yellow model.
But if you have more in school, then you wouldn't have to give.
But I think we may actually have more students in the building in a yellow model, because I think those green students would come in the yellow model, and then at least that gives the educator an opportunity to work with them individually one-on-one, and if there is connectivity issues at home, the educator can work with that student to come up with some kind of perhaps of an alternative for the lack of internet connectivity. Whereas if we go green and people are not in the building at all, then the virtual becomes the end-all be-all. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes. I think we have to make a decision based on what's going to be good for the majority of the children. There are going to be exceptions, and the administration will just have to deal with those exceptions. We're not going to be able to deal with them on an individual basis. I think we need to look at the comprehensive plan that benefits the families and the staff in delivering instruction. That's.
Is it can you do 9 to 12 green and the rest yellow?
Class sizes would be an issue. We can't bring them all in.
Can't bring them all in.
We can't bring them all into the building. The classes are too big.
Yeah. Go down the hallway.
The big restricting factors that we're facing are transportation and buildings. The size of our buildings, what we can get kids in. Those are the two biggest obstacles. I mean, there are some classes size 25. Not a lot, but Charlie told me there are some classes of 25. And the structure of the building is designed, makes an interesting spatial issue.
Who's responsible for kids K through 4 if their parents have to go back to work full-time to make sure they're sitting in front of that computer and doing what they need to be doing during the day? Like, if you've got a first grader.
K to 4 is with us 4 days a week.
It's
In the
what?
yellow. K to 4 is with us 4 days a week in the yellow model.
Okay. All right, sorry.
That's okay.
Can I think we have to make a decision tonight, preferably soon. But this is not the greatest situation, obviously, for anyone. And this is the best compromise I think we've given our administrators, the time, and they put in the effort, and with the input that we have, I think the yellow scenario is the way we should go, because that's what they think is best. That meets the majority of the needs, I think, at this time, and there are some ways of working with that might make it more possible for people who are on the fringes. But the only addition I would make to the yellow plan is to ensure that Wednesday is an instructional day. And I just feel very strongly that kids need to know that they're responsible, if they can, be in on those days. And if not, then they make an arrangement with their teacher for that Wednesday. But nobody wants to be in this situation. Hopefully we can all go to green. Hopefully the CDC and Dr. what's his name? Shaw makes some changes in what's going to be required. But I just think we have to go yellow. I don't see any way around it. And I applaud your efforts, administrators and people who had input, teachers and the union and whomever, but it's just life as it is right now.
No, I was going to say, okay, do we make a motion?
No,
We got more.
I don't disagree with anything you said. What I find ironic is there are so many government agencies that are not open, including our Maine State Legislature, which has not gone back into session. And we're sitting here with a gut-wrenching decision about kids, and you can't get into the DMV, and you can't, your town office is through a slot, and this is big, and I totally appreciate everything that our administrators and have done, this is painful and difficult decision that we're
But you
gonna
guys gotta fix the access stuff.
Well,
Somehow.
but that's something that can be worked on.
Yeah.
It's not something to prevent us from moving
Yeah.
forward.
Oh, I agree with you. I don't like it, I agree with you. But you can't leave, I just keep using Jess as the example, but you can't leave our kids out.
No.
High school kids have to, I don't think this can be done without good internet somehow.
And I agree with what Todd is saying. I think that if we went green, we're gonna have a lot more kids that are gonna be in the same boat as Jess's kids than if we went with the yellow. And again, it's 1 day a week that, and I know, I understand that's big, but it's 1 day a week.
Yeah. Okay.
And I chime in on what Julie is saying. I applaud you guys. I know this took hours and hours and hours to come up with these plans, and I think you did a fantastic job. When I read through it and I saw the grades K through 4 were going 4 days a week, I knew exactly what your goal was. And thank you so much for doing that, because that's what I have heard being in the public eye more and more from parents. And I know that a daycare in Phillips has just closed, and a daycare in Kingfield only takes a small number, so daycare is definitely huge for a lot of parents. Was there any discussion of the K through 4 kids going 5 days a week for that very reason?
I mean, we
there-
did, everything that was discussed, I can't remember specifically if that topic, I'm sure it was. You know, like we said, our first plan was to try to get kids in 5 days a week on some kind of a rotating schedule, but that was just, our goal has been to try to get kids back as much as we possibly can. I would say, I don't think there was anything we didn't consider or roll around, but like we said, every time we come up with what we thought was a good idea, we came up with 8 reasons why it wasn't, so. None
I'm
of this is
very
ideal.
concerned that by adopting yellow, we're going against what the majority of our parents said would work for their families.
Said was what?
I think the majority, according to that pie chart, the majority of the people said a green would work best for their family. And by adopting a yellow, we're going against what the parents who support these children at home need.
But I'm not sure that it's our job to convenient, our job is about best plan, safety, what, you know what I mean? I don't think we can convenience.
I don't think it's
At
just convenience, though. I mean, a child's development depends a lot on what their family can provide.
And I will say, in 2 of our 4 buildings, I pulled the chart back up, the yellow option was the was the preferred
But
option.
if you add up all the
Yeah, if you add it up,
percentages,
yeah.
green is still what the majority of the people wanted.
But the problem with green is that in all action, logistically, it's just, you're not going to have the money to implement the measures you would need to carry out.
Well, also, you've got, your child's not going to be coming to school at the traditional time, so you might run into daycare issues in the morning or after school. And there's still going to be issues there. The other thing I like a little bit about the yellow plan is if we have to suddenly transition into red, I think we're halfway there, or we're partway there.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to point out to Karen, she's behind the monitor.
Poor thing.
Do you want to open it?
I'm so patient.
Yeah. So, yes, we can open up the floor for public comment. Yeah.
So if we do the yellow, how are we going to split up the classes? Because like, it's my senior year, I don't want to split up our class and go like our last year without it. Like,
You
each
can go to
other.
Ms. Tran. I don't know how they split it up, to be honest with you, I can't answer that question. I know they talked about some districts, I'm not saying we're doing it this way here, there's some districts are talking alphabetically.
Yeah, I heard
It
about
would depend
that.
on class sizes. They were talking also about taking into account childcare. Maybe there was a sibling at one of the lower elementaries, one of our pre-K to 8 buildings, and on a day they were going to be out, try to make sure the older sibling could be out, to assist with split childcare, things like that. These were all different things that we took into consideration. I don't want to be guessing right now as to whether that, I know they're going to work on that next week, but you could email Ms. Tran or Ms. Stevens and just let them know this is how I feel about this, would you consider this? I think they want to hear from you. So I didn't answer it.
That's okay.
Thank you, Pam. So can I ask the administrators if there was any discussion, or what your feelings are if the K through 4 kids could go 5 days a week? Maybe there was.
We may get into some, I'll let them
Right,
chime
I'm
in.
sure there are issues.
But, we may get into some contractual issues if we're not being able to, because of the adjustments of schedules, if we're not being able to provide them the same professional development opportunities as other teachers, as, I'm speculating. I can't say with 100% certainty that, there could be that. I'm looking, I always look to see if Christy
I
nods.
also think one of the things that we anticipate is, given the way that we have to keep kids together, teachers are not going to step away from their classes in the same way that they would, so that they don't have that shared planning time ever with a colleague if they have to have lunch with their kids and then take their group of kids out for recess. And I think just transforming to this model is huge. And so, again, I think Julie's idea of figuring out some way that there's a required check-in remotely in the morning, or, a lesson in the morning, that expectation, that's a better step, because it would then still give teachers the ability to have shared time to plan and engage in the professional development of how to use the new tools.
Brenda or Jen?
No, I totally agree. I guess our big concern was the safety issue as well. Having all that amount of children back in the buildings, and just having that time to ensure that our classrooms were clean for the safety of the kids, to keep the COVID away. And that day, it is an instruction day. That's a day that can be used for extra RTI. We even left it where possibility of a couple students could come into the building for extra help if they needed it. I know that was mentioned, I think, in the high school level as well. So it's not a day off.
No.
It's definitely, and the children will have assignments that they'll have to do and be more accountable when they come back in.
No, and I understand that, and truly I do greatly appreciate it. But these are kids whose parents are working, and, well, there aren't a lot of daycares around anymore, just so they're not going to be able to go to daycare and all work together around the kitchen table. These parents have to work, and I'm just concerned about what's going to become of these K-4 kids. I understand it's seating time, but if mom and dad aren't home to provide that for these kids, how is it going to happen? I don't know. I don't have an answer. I'm just very concerned about, these daycares that are closing. Like I said, we've got a really small daycare in Kingfield, and to my knowledge, it's the only daycare that I'm aware of.
I feel like most of us kind of made it work from March through June, and I think a lot of people have kind of got a backup plan for that.
Maybe.
Like older sibling or, grandparents and things, that I feel like we've all kind of acclimated a little bit, and there's really nothing you can do to make everybody happy, and it's, it's a tough call.
It is a tough call.
I'd like to make a motion, we end discussion and move to our board action item.
I second it.
There was just one more question, because she's had her hand up, and then.
I'm just a little confused because of all the different plans. Can you clarify that on the days that the kids are not in school, will they be virtually watching their class, their teacher teach their class? Or are they, I'm confused that part, I'm sorry.
No, they would, as it stands, again, Administrator chime in, there would be the in-person instruction, and then they would be provided materials or assignments that they have to work on the following day.
Okay.
And they would work on those remotely while the teachers, doing the same instruction with the cohort B. And then the Wednesday would provide the check-in, how did that assignment go, do you need support, things like that was the intent. And we may look at, retooling Wednesday a little bit. And then they would see the kids again back on Thursday after they'd had that day to work on whatever the remote was. What's it, how did it go, what do you need help with, and then the same thing would be, it would continue to repeat.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a question, how they work in high school? So they'd have classes, because they only have,
I think what they're talking, again,
you would
we
say
can call
8
Shelley.
classes in a day.
I think they said 8 classes, I think they said they were talking about having 8 classes in a day, instead of the 2 block, you'd have all your classes in one day. Divide those into 2 cohorts, so it'd be the same as what I just described. They'd have in-class instruction, and then they might have remote work. There's a possibility too, they may do some live streaming from the high school where it would be in class, but that goes into your concern, but they have in-class instruction and then some, virtual live streaming, if you will. So it's that, the high school is still a work in progress as far as what specifically it will look like.
Can I call for a vote on my motion?
You want to repeat what your motion was so everybody understands it? I understand.
My motion was that we end discussion items and move on to board action items.
I second it.
Yes, she represented
Oh, she did?
it.
Jesse?
Jesse had.
Jesse seconded, okay, sorry, Jess. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. So we already did the...
Did the calendar already.
Calendar already, so approval of the safety and wellness guide.
I make a motion, we accept the safety and wellness guidelines as proposed.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. And then we have adoption of an academic plan.
I make a motion, we go with the yellow plan.
I second it.
Any discussion?
With the changes that
Julie said.
Make insert.
My proposal was to ensure that that Wednesday is an instructional day, whether it's half day or full day, that there's some expectation on the part of teachers and students that it will be instructional.
You're all right with that?
I'm okay with that.
All those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? So, you running numbers, I didn't.
I don't have the calculations here, I just have who opposed.
The numbers are huge, I mean, in favor.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, oh, yeah, I got 3 no's.
Okay. So it looks like the hybrid instruction yellow plan with the adjustment for the Wednesday being a seat day. Is the plan moving forward? Thank you, everybody, for your hard work. Then we need to revisit the motion tabled to spend the CRF funds.
Make a motion, can I make a motion? Sure. That we adjourn?
Well, how about we revisit?
We're not there yet, Jesse.
You're almost, Jesse. You know I'll call on you.
I make the motion that we use the CRF funds as needed for the model.
Well, Cindy's
It's already been, the motion's already been made, but we're just revisiting it for.
So my original motion, I think, was to spend the CRF monies starting now.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any more discussion
That
on
was a
it?
while ago.
Yes, we didn't forget. All those in favor of spending the funds now?
What's the motion, I?
To suspend the funds that we're anticipating that we'll get to be able to start purchasing things now.
Raise your hand.
All those in favor? The sooner you raise your hand, the sooner she can adjourn. Great.
Very good to see the whole world.
Yes, it is, and thank you for the board for being back. It's great to see everybody back in person.
And welcome. You picked an interesting time to.
Jesse?
Now I can make a motion to adjourn.
Assuming everybody's in favor.
Better vote quick and official.
All those in favor of adjourning?
Use your gavel.
All those in favor of adjourning? Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm jealous. You're gonna write it next Thursday? I'll have to check it out.
Oh, yes, online.
Yeah, we off. Welcome.